Karthikeyan Nachiyappan. He is an architect who has graduated from the Architectural Association. His research has been published in many esteemed journals, such as the Indian Concrete Journal. He is the founder and director of Studio of Architectural Urbanism, an art and architecture consultancy focusing on research and development of housing projects in Ooty and in Chennai. His research interests include low-cost housing, architectural space making, informality and slums, inequalities in planning, and policies and urban design.
Welcome to UGC lecture series on architecture, unit number 2, lecture 2. Let's see what are all the interesting things framing the learning component today. So, we will be looking at socio-economic factors contributing to housing as well as affordability, a major criteria which we would be looking at, and different housing programs, especially the Rajiv Awas Yojana and the key pilot project in collaboration with Tamil Nadu Slum Clearance Board. As we had seen in the preceding chapters, we already know 31.16% of people live in urban areas, which means that this growing population of urban areas has led to problems of land shortage, housing shortfall and congested transit, which means that lack of available good land or urbanized land and lack of provision of proper housing to the people who have been migrated, as well as different modes of transport catering to these migrated population. Before we move into the component of affordability, let's get to know what is marginalization. As metaphorically the image says, the red one which is excluded, it's otherwise called a social exclusion in the society. A margin or a section of people excluded socially, physically, economically from the other sectors of the society. In other words, groups of people who are socially excluded and experience inequalities in the distribution of resources and power, so as well as monetary, physical and other resources. Look at this image. This has been the growth of population in India. Any other European, American or any Pacific continents could not cater this population growth or influx of migration, but in India it is spontaneous growth, natural growth, and India is able to cater to these growing population, which means that there is a lack of affordable housing to all these population. So, urbanization has resulted in the people increasingly living in slums and squatter settlements, and also deteriorated the housing condition of the economically weaker section of the society. Before we get to know what are affordability criteria, we have to define what is EWS, LIG, MIG and HIG. Economically weaker section, as per different reports, it is based on the income level of a particular group of a society. The group further estimated that 88% of the shortage pertains to the houses for economically weaker section and another 11% for low income groups, which means that of the total housing shortage of 100%, 99% demands to this society of economically weaker section. To be more elaborate, so based on monthly per capita expenditure, we could categorize EWS, LIG, MIG and HIG based on this. A monthly expenditure of 0 to 3,300 Indian rupees could be categorized as economically weaker section. So, looking at the whole table, we could categorize that the estimated number of households in 2007 was 21.81 million, out of which shortage for the economically weaker section is 21.78 million, which means that the inference, the housing percentage shortage in EWS is 99.9%, which is double than the estimated number of households, whereas in the HIG and MIG it is less than 0.2% only. But in contrary, the private developers now concentrate more on HIG and MIG, leaving more houses vacant in cities and especially metropolitan cities like Chennai, Mumbai and Delhi. So, to define affordability, we have different sources of definition. So, let us take the first. According to RICS report, affordability means provision of adequate shelter on a sustained basis, otherwise a prolonged basis, ensuring security of tenure, which is the most important thing any householder should have. According to the Task Force on Affordable Housing set up by the Maharashtra Urban Planning Authority, affordability could be defined based on parameters like size of the dwelling. In India, the average family size is 4.5 and housing affordability derived by the household income of the population. So, these two important criteria according to the MHUPA defines affordability. So, this table details it about the EMI or the rent, meaning a average householder shares 30 to 40 percentage of his gross monthly income on housing, which means that out of his whole expenditure, almost 1/3 to 1/4 of it would be going for the EMI for the purchase power or as a rent in housing. According to the KPMG report, it is based on 3 different parameters, which is income level, size of the dwelling unit and affordability. So, finally, to conclude, which we could say that according to Jones-Lang-LaSalle's definition, affordability could be defined based on 4 parameters. One is the minimum volume of habitation, which means that in a certain enclosure, the amount of air quality, lighting, ventilation, hygiene factors, the volume inhabited by 4 to 5 dwellers in a particular house could be defined based on affordability. Provision of basic amenities, social, civic facilities like sewage, sanitation, water supply, electricity. Cost of the house, it is based on how much a person can afford based on his monthly income and the location of the house. This plays a key role in increasing the cost of the house or decreasing the cost of the house. Issues in the development of affordable housing. We could say that 2 major issues could be detailed out. One is excessive control of development of land, which means that imposing different rules on particular land based on state and central government rules creates a shortage. It increases the price of the land. When the land as a commodity goes higher in price, housing as a commodity also gets increased in price, which means that the affordability can be low. And the last point, lack of access to home finance for low income groups. Any bank for that matter, it gives clear access to housing finance for the higher income groups and the middle income groups, but what happens in case of the low income groups? So, that becomes an important question that defines affordability, and it is also an issue in the development of affordable housing. This is an interesting tabular column relating to the pre-construction process. So, let us take a detailed look at it. The approval process after land acquisition. So, before the commencement of the project, it approximately takes 24 to 32 months, which means that 2 to 2.5 years of the process goes within the pre-construction, which means that it includes conversion of land use, which is approximately 8 to 12 months, project letter for intent and license for 4 to 6 months, pre-construction approvals from state level bodies, which take 6 to 8 months, the construction approvals from central bodies, which again takes to around 5 to 7 months. So, put together on the whole, it takes 24 to 32 months before construction. Second is the construction period, which will definitely take 24 to 30 months for that scale of the project. So, till the construction of the project, we already have gone between 4 to 5 years. So, which means that this also relates to increase in cost of the materials, increase in cost of labor and increase in cost of the household, which is at the final market price. And post construction, we have 2 more procedures, which is inspection and occupancy certificate, which again takes around 2 to 3 months. So, on the whole, the end process before construction will be around 2 to 2.5 years, and till the end commodity which reaches the user will take 5 to 6 years. This relates to the private play of affordable housing in India. So, there are different push and pull factors which take. So, already the developments have been concentrated on the upper hand, upper mid and the high income groups. So, now the developers want to diversify, which is again a push factor to move into the affordable housing. On the contrary, there is a huge demand leading to high velocity, sale velocities in low income housing, and few branded players in the low and the mid income housing segment attract developers to gain the first movers advantage, which means that there are different examples in cities which are being practiced recently targeting the low income section, where once you get the housing as a commodity before 10 lakhs, the increase in sale velocity is always there and the need is always between 5 to 10 lakh community. Second pull factor, important pull factor for affordable housing is that improvement in infrastructural connectivity. Always there is a hypothesis in India where the affordable housing is always kept outside the city from the city center, which increases the cost of the transport or the mobility infrastructure. Here, improvement in infrastructural connectivity to the far-flung locations is increasing their acceptability as residential destination. So, that is another pull factor which is important. So, finally, the several facilitators for affordable housing such as public authorities, international development organizations and different NGOs also play an important role, and their activities have been increased in promoting this affordable housing segments. So, the demand supply dynamics, one key inference what you could feel over here is there is a huge gap between the demand and supply for low income houses. So, the share of the demand is almost 35%, and what is being provided, the share of supply, which is in the lighter pale pink color. So, you could see the drastic difference between what is the demand and what is being the supply. But on the contrary, if you just look at the houses beyond 10 lakhs, the share of supply is more than the share of demand, which means that for the high income and middle income, there are nil demand, we could say. Home loan dispersals by housing finance institutional mechanisms. So, this could be further elaborated that for the past 3 years, you could see a marginal increase in the provision of housing loans above 10 lakhs, again which means that different banks and housing and microfinance corporations promote the housing for more than 10 lakhs, which means that the targeted section, which is below 3 or 5 lakhs, are very negligible. So, affordable housing segment should promote these smaller sets of groups through institutional mechanisms to promote more and more affordable housing. Estimated construction cost. So, for a brief idea about how we get to the construction cost. So, every day we come across housing getting as a commodity priced per square foot, which means that we get a housing as a commodity in major areas which cost around 10,000 per square foot, 20,000 per square foot. So, this is just a breakdown on how it is getting calculated. So, for affordable housing, the cost of the land for those targeted section might cost around 150 to maximum of 250 rupees per square foot. Again, stamp duty and the registration of that purchased land will cost around 25 per square foot, and the construction cost for the low income groups might be between 800 to 1000, and the legal approval cost another 25, and the gross developer market rate, which is around 300, and the finished unit, the stamp duty and registration of the finished unit with the occupancy certificate will cost around 100. So, all these sum up to form around 1400 to 1700 per square foot. So, if we take an average of a middle income group affording 500 square foot, this will definitely cost around 8.5 lakhs. This slide gives you an information about the landscape of affordable housing development in India. So, this concentrates on major cities. So, you could take a look at different regions which are being concentrated on: the national capital region of Delhi, Ahmedabad, Mumbai, Pune, Bangalore, Chennai and Calcutta. So, there are major developers who contribute to this, including, say for example, in Mumbai, Tata Housing, Housing Development Infrastructure Limited, Raheja, and different real estate developers who have been actively involved in the promotion of affordable housing. And the only problem with this is the location of those affordable housing projects lie within from 65 to 100 kilometer radius from the city center. In the case of Chennai, Nanmangalam, Oragadam and Cheyyur ECR are the major developments of affordable housing, and the major developers contributing it includes TVS, Mark Constructions and Annai Builders, which are again from 25 to 100 kilometers from the city center. The major hubs of affordable housing developments are taken care with from a point in the city center. Say for example, the distance from the major locations includes from the city center, which is in the case of Mumbai, Nariman Point is the city center. In case of Chennai, Nungambakam is considered to be the city center by different research groups. And if you look at this map, which states that from the city center 30, 60, 90 to 150 kilometer radius, there are developments in different countries, and these red points indicate the housing projects within that. So, the inference states that distance from the city center plays an important role in creating affordable housing hubs, which again means that imagine I am put up in a housing block which is 100 kilometers away from the city. The cost of me in reduction in paying the rents or maybe purchasing power might be increased in contrary while traveling 100 kilometers from that place to the city center. Now, just to give a brief about the institutional approach towards affordable housing, the main objective is housing for all, meaning inclusive housing including the marginalized population of the society, that is called as housing for all. The institutional approach in terms bifurcates into the affordability to buy and affordability to rent. In case of buying, which is purchase power, or in case of early monthly installments, you pay for a particular interest rate. So, the private sector or the developers will be the first part where they develop a particular project with the help of government bodies like urban local bodies, the urban development authorities, Reserve Bank of India, with the help of financial institutions like bank and other microfinance institutions which fund the particular project. In case of affordability to rent, especially for the lower income group, the first enablers would be self-help groups or the non-governmental organizations which lead to the providers, which might be the urban local bodies or financial institution and other research institutes, in promoting low cost technology in construction. And finally, the executor, the end point where the private developers or the public private partnership companies play an important role. So, here are a few articles for you just for a reference on how affordable housing is getting a teeming reaction in India, and especially as it says MAHADA, which is Maharashtra Housing and Urban Development Authority, joins hands with private developers, and activities of affordable housing by Shabana Azmi in Mumbai are also becoming more famous in promotion of affordable housing projects. All this focused down to a point on, can houses for economically weaker section coexist with others? Me as a high income group or say a middle income group might want to stay with the low income group or the other economically weaker section. This growing gap, the social gap, has to be negotiated by urban planners, policy makers and architects. So, we as designers should take care and make that yes of 60%, make it possible by inclusive housing, providing economically weaker section a part within the housing complexes. Even though there are many policies and rules saying include 10% of that for the EWS, but that actually does not happen. So, the policy framework and regulations for affordable housing has been created at the central government, which enables promotion of different housing programs. As you could see, the National Urban Housing and Habitat Policy, which we have already looked at it in the preceding chapters along with JNNURM, BSUP, the Basic Services for Urban Poor, IHSUP, which is Integrated Housing and Slum Development Program along with subsidy scheme, and Rajiv Awas Yojana. Rajiv Awas Yojana would be the major component of today's lecture series, where we would be looking into detail a pilot project in collaboration with Tamil Nadu Slum Clearance Board. RAY, it is an Indian government program that attempts to help slum dwellers gain appropriate housing and address the process by which slums are created and reproduced. As we already know, since the Slum Act 1956, slum eviction was a major part at that time. Then it came into slum improvement trusts were formed, slum rehabilitation, redevelopment, and finally now addressing slum situation is possible only through community participation, public awareness and involvement of a bottom up approach. So, Rajiv Awas Yojana also tries to get that link through different housing programs within the country. The key objectives of RAY would include improving and provision of housing, basic civic and social facilities inside slum. The first thing that strikes our mind is lack of hygiene facilities, lack of sanitary facilities, lack of different social and civic infrastructure. So, addressing these and improving them is the first important strategy of RAY. Enabling reforms to address the formation of slums, institutional mechanisms to create affordable housing stock, especially involvement of different finance corporations, and access of housing could be possible only through financial institutions, empowering community by participation in decision making. In India, especially the diversity in India has led to this empowering community. If we are in a community, we could do more, and especially when we involve in decision making, when we create our own affordable housing stock, it plays a major role. The pilot project which we are going to discuss today is the Attipattu pilot project in Ambattur, Chennai, which includes the design of 1056 tenements. Let us take a look at small detail profile of Chennai city in short. So, there are 18 wards, out of which the proportion of slum households to urban households is 28.5. So, most of the slum dwellers live along the banks of Adayar River, Coombe River, Buckingham Canal and other small streams. So, this has led to the major formation of slum along Coombe rivers and water bodies. So, the focus of our today's lecture is Kakaji Nagar slum details. So, which is a 30-year-old slum which includes population of 5,578 and number of families include 1,452. So, on an average again 4.5, the average household dwellers come to around 4.5, which is again to the proportion of Indian household level, out of which 1819 are employed. The location and morphology of the entire slum states that it is a linear morphology, which means that it is like a train like structure, and organic form of development is restricted within two urban grids. So, as you could see, two major roads and the slum which is being organically developed through those in a linear morphology. These are some of the existing problems in the slum. As you could see, high voltage tower line passing through it, water supply not proper sanitation and there were open drains in it, cluster of house which leads to lack of proper ventilation, proper lighting, sanitation problems, and tin sheet roof houses, which means that there are no permanent structures, mostly it are temporary structures. Out of the total population, the socio-economic status reveals that male contributed to 51% of the entire population, while the female being 49%, and out of which the literacy rate for both of them crosses 50%. So, this directly relates to the topic of either providing primary, middle, higher secondary schools, or what kind of educational institutions could mitigate the process of urban development in slums. These interesting graphs gives information on the first graph. Say for example, the monthly income of the entire proportion of the population living lies within the target of 2500 to 5000, which means that most of the category of people fall below poverty line or in the economically weaker section of the society. The people who are living in it mostly are the scheduled castes and scheduled tribes, which contribute to around 57% of the entire population. The usage of toilets play a very important role. So, according to statistics, it says that in people 44% of the population use toilets within the house and 39% outside the house as open drains, and very few or marginal population use open spaces or say public toilets. And this gives you idea of less than 1% have permanent structures. So, there is a need as per Tamil Nadu Slum Clearance Board or Rajiv Awas Yojana to improve this condition of making the tin sheet and huts a permanent structure. So, the first process was community mobilization. As an outsider or a foreign particle, I cannot get inside a slum and access their resources easily. So, the first thing to do as a public participation is to mobilize with the community, familiarize yourself with the community to get to know each other and take your actions plans as steps through early wisdom words. The next is socio-economic survey, which gives details about different age groups, the education literacy rate, how many are employed, how many are unemployed, how many permanent structures, unpermanent structures. This also gives you details about what is the exact need of the community in terms of redevelopment programs. As you already saw this linear morphology, which is in this 5th zone, which is being transferred to the 7th zone, which is shown in the red dots over here. So, which means that there is a morphological change of the slum settlement in terms of relocation, which might be positive or negative. The details of community facilities that have been provided within the community includes high school. So, all these are taken into consideration before developing the entire project. So, as you could see, all of it are located within 1.5 to 2 mile radius and mostly within 1.5 kilometer radius as different civic and social facilities. So, beyond this there are proposed amenities which includes ration shop, primary schools, library. So, all these proposed amenities would be based on the socio-economic survey which we saw in the previous slide. The scheme layout of Attipattu goes as follows. So, you have a proportion, the morphology is divided into two through this service road which acts as an entrance. So, you have a proportion of middle income group and the proportion of EWS and LIG groups, and this space were reserved for EWS in phase 2. So, which means that this is a phase wise development. So, this whatever you see as this morphology is phase 1 development, and you could see 2 blank spaces which again could be let out as commercial spaces. So, this is an interesting scheme followed called as cross subsidy system, which we will be looking at in the last slide. So, the proposal includes a central core of staircase which has a ventilation through this and a corridor of 1.83 meter wide serving 1, 2, 3 and 4 houses. So, this otherwise means is 4 to a core in housing. So, it enters through a living space which is ventilated through an open to sky space, which again ventilates the kitchen which is 1.44 by 0.91, otherwise a kitchenette, which serves a small bedroom with a loft provision given above, a balcony which serves an entrance to the water closet and bath. So, it is carefully planned to match the need for that society, and it's a still plus 4 structures, which means that this gives you an idea of the detailed plan of the entire structure, and each house was provided with an internal water supply and sewer units, individual fiber reinforced plastic overhead tanks and separate power connection for internal electrification. So, all the civic social facilities have been provided within the community, and the plinth area of it includes 36.53 square meters, and the carpet area, that is the built usable area, which is 25.16 square meters. So, the proposed infrastructural amenities outside includes different concrete roads, pavement roads, culverts, stormwater drain, rainwater harvesting, which is a major source which is again done in high income housing, water supply from deep borewell, street lights, tree planting and development of a park was also done as community mobilization in terms of communal activities and facilities. So, it is again fostering the community to get outside and mingle with different social sectors of the society. So, the funding pattern was very simple. The government of India's contribution to the entire project was 34.72 crores, and Tamil Nadu government's contribution, which means that a proportion of the project in under RAY scheme, Rajiv Awas Yojana scheme, there is a proportion of the project cost which is borne by the central government and a proportion by the state government. The beneficiary contribution, that is the people who are going to live, are marginally contributing to around 6.4 crores, and amount to be received by selling 192. Flats would be 51.81, which means that 192 flats of 771 square foot at a rate of 3,500 per square foot, which will contribute 51.81, and amount to be received by selling commercial plots, again 8. So, out of this is being cross subsidized by cost of construction, which is 84.92 crores, cost of construction 34, and corpus in terms of maintaining. So, any Rajiv Awas Yojana scheme would be maintained by the particular implementation scheme through communities, and for that maintenance purpose you would be allocating a particular fund. The entire construction cost is being cross subsidized by the amount received here. So, this interesting proposal means that there is a cross subsidy system. In simple words, taking from one profit and realizing it in the construction of another. So, in this project 15% of the cost of construction of entire slum settlements is being cross subsidized by the profit generated in terms of construction of the low income and the EWS groups. So, the 192 MIG flats, which again means that there is a community fostering. So, in the first slides we were talking about social inclusiveness. So, this is a housing complex which has different social sectors of the society, including the economically weaker section, low income group and the middle income group. So, on the whole there is a community fostering and as well as a inclusiveness that is being generated through the cross subsidy system. So, just to get to know the summary of what we have learned today. So, we have learned about different social economic factors contributing to the housing, and we have peeked into the inequality, marginalization, social stratification that also leads to the affordability parameters and institutional mechanisms supporting housing. Different housing programs, out of which we have closely looked at Rajiv Awas Yojana and its pilot project in Chennai. And different questions for you to be peeked through is what is marginalization, and name the factors leading to social inequalities, what are the parameters that define affordability, set out a brief agenda on the ongoing projects of affordable housing in India, explain the institutional approach to affordable housing, what are the concerns and activities of Rajiv Awas Yojana. RAY has implemented different schemes in different parts of the country. So, as a further research you could also check out different urban housing projects in different states, especially Maharashtra, more information and research. Explain the key strategies adopted in Kakaji Nagar pilot project of RAY in association with Tamil Nadu Slum Clearance Board. So, let us take a look at different parameters of housing and other housing typologies and few more interesting topics in our further lecture series. Thank you.